met your match, chameleon.
We're not so different, you and I.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by my dumpling-loving, kung fu fighting co-host, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Kung Fu Panda 4. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Tanner, it's been a long time since the last Kung Fu Panda movie, and
8 years.
And they're posed back on the big screen, and you and I have gotten
That's
a
true.
chance to see it. People our age kind of grew up with Kung Fu Panda.
Absolutely,
and it was
yeah.
something very important to me. And I'm glad that DreamWorks is bringing back one of their iconic franchises. But now
Yeah,
we have
for sure.
seen Kung Fu Panda 4. And I'm excited to talk to you about it. I'm excited to talk to our community members about it. You can join our Discord to talk about it. You can leave comments. You can like the video. You can subscribe. Tanner, enough waffling.
Okay.
Did you like Kung Fu Panda 4?
Kind of.
Okay.
Because, Tucker, here's the thing. I just rewatched the first Kung Fu Panda and watched 2 and 3
Yeah.
because I for sure hadn't seen 3 and then maybe only seen parts of 2.
Sure.
As you said, we grew up with these, but I was always more of a Kung Fu Panda 1 kid.
Sure. I had no need for those dirty low sequels.
I had no need for the sequels because the sequels are all pretty mid,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Even 2, which I know people dig a lot, but I think it's pretty on par with the rest of them, including 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has its highs and lows. I think that 4 is pretty clearly the worst of the series. I don't think anyone would really sort of disagree with that. People who have seen it, I mean, obviously let us know down in the comments if you're a fan of this franchise. But like, here's the thing: the mainstays are still strong. Jack Black is still doing his thing. This is basically like his character that he has formed and molded over the last
It's probably his
decade
iconic
and a half.
character, to be honest.
Honestly, yeah. The Furious 5 isn't in this one. Spoilers,
No.
I guess. So that's a bit of a detriment. And we'll get into all this in due time. But like the animation is still strong. It's still got its fun moments, but it's all right at the end of the day. It's just kind of all right.
This is one of the most clear examples in my mind of just dragging out a franchise again for a quick buck. I think this is easily the worst of the movies. It's been a long time since I've seen, especially 2 and 3, but I feel that a lot of the character stuff in this movie doesn't work. I feel that the comedy almost barely works. I thought this was the least funny performance I've ever seen from Jack Black. I thought that the writing was really weird. I thought the villain was weak. I thought the side characters were lame. The animation is fine. DreamWorks does deliver good animation. I mean, but it isn't until the final action sequence that I felt any spark of intrigue or excitement.
Sure.
I felt like this was just like going through the motions film that was supposed to be funny and is supposed to be family friendly, but it just kind of ends up feeling like coasting and like trying to inject some juice in a franchise that for the last 8 years has not been dead. They have made multiple TV shows with these characters, multiple as like specials and shorts, and like this series is alive and well in a streaming space. And frankly, this feels like a Cinderella 2, Lilo and Stitch 3 kind of like.
It feels like a
just
direct-to-video kind of thing.
Direct-to-video thing.
I mean,
Can't get back
especially
most of
when
the cast. We're just doing like a side story. I
Yeah.
think this is a underwhelming film, and I think it's one of the weaker Pixar films. The DreamWorks films I've seen in a while.
It's certainly a weak Pixar
if this was
film.
a
I'll give
Pixar
you that.
film,
But Tucker, I largely agree with all your points there. So let's talk about the story of Kung Fu Panda 4. Because where Poe has sort of been for the last 8 years is he's been the Dragon Warrior. He's been kicking butt as the Dragon Warrior, baby. But now time has come for change to happen. He is meant to be he's like supposed to be the wizened leader of Peace Valley and pass on the moniker of the Dragon Warrior. And who does he pass it on to? Obviously, it's pretty clear. This isn't really a spoiler, but if you really care, I'm just gonna say it. He passes it on to a new character, portrayed by Awkwafina, and this is very evident because she is heavily featured in all the marketing material. She's on the poster. She might even be second billed on this thing. I'm not really sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
She's certainly the
and she's got a lot of screen
second
time.
She's certainly the second most prominent character in this film.
Yeah, by the character by the name of Zhen, who is this sort of like thief character.
She's a rogue.
Here's yes. Here's my thing about it. I think this is largely on par with a lot of the like 2 and 3 for like what I said, and the biggest detriment here is all of what you said, but mostly for me Awkwafina.
Sure.
And here's my Awkwafina bias coming
Yeah,
in. Okay,
yeah.
I do not care for Awkwafina, and particularly in the screen presence that she has cultivated thus far, as this sort of like loud-mouthed, smarmy, probably like most of the time sure of herself, but fast talking sort of side quippy character. It's the same thing in every fucking movie, especially if it's a children's movie. It's always the same kind of character, and it was wearing thin when it started, and it's worn thin well by this point.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Jen is not my biggest problem with this movie. I actually think that in terms of an actual performance and range, I think Awkwafina is given a lot more to work with here because she is given some emotional moments and like sort of self-unsure moments by the end of the film, which we usually don't see from her because she's usually not a prominent enough character to get that kind of time. We certainly didn't see that in Migration last year, where she's only on screen for just a couple minutes.
But I'm especially thinking of her character from a Walt Disney animation, not a Pixar film, but Raya and the Last Dragon, a very similar sort of character here.
Yeah, but I think the problem with Jen is that she ends up becoming like the focus of the film in a weird way, because it's mostly about her arc in learning to trust other people and to use her abilities and skills for good, and learning to trust Poe and have a sense of humor. And then the villain is also her villain, and she's the one that defeats the villain.
That's a good point.
The end. And
That's a good point.
She's not a terrible character, but she's a much less interesting character than all the other previously established Kung Fu Panda characters, because we just sloughed the Furious Five off to the side. Master Shifu is in a glorified cameo role. Both his dads are in glorified cameo roles. Everything that worked about the dynamic of those first films is gone in large part, and Jen does not replace that. It kind of has like sort of a buddy thing going where they're ribbing back and forth, and I believe the intention of this film was to sort of give Poe a character that annoyed him like he annoyed Master Shifu in the other movies, and I understand the idea of like reversing those roles a little bit, but I don't think it works because on a visual level, Jen is the least inspired Kung Fu Panda main character ever. I mean, you look at Tigress or Mantis or Master Shifu.
You can definitely tell a lot from their designs, their design spirit.
And she doesn't really have that. But she's not the main character, but she feels like the main character sometimes. I just think it's a weird scripting and pacing balance when, like, where the focus goes in terms of, like, character progression and screen time.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Poe then, who is on paper the main character, and I'm interested by a lot of what you had to say about like Jen kind of ending up being the main character, because ultimately I feel like that might be the point. You know, she has the larger arc, she has to become the Dragon Warrior, but Poe's arc is that he is supposed to like, you know, allow change to happen, and it's okay if he's no longer the Dragon Warrior, and they set out this arc for him to like become a more wizened sort of figure, be comfortable with this new role that he is sort of taking on, where he's not, you know, doing kung fu, or he is parceling out pieces of wisdom. And this is an issue that I have with 2 and 3 as well, is that I feel like there's too many irons in the fire here, too many thematic lessons that our characters have to learn, and a lot of them fall by the wayside. That being what I just mentioned, being one of them. Like, I don't think Poe really comes into his role very well, even though they tried to tell us that he does. And that's why I think the first one is so successful, is that it's simple, it's to the point, it's, hey, you can be whatever you want to be, just trust your gut, and like the power is within you all along. That's the thematic crux of Kung Fu Panda Un. But all these other ones, including 4, just have so many things going on, and especially when you introduce 4, where you have basically a second main character who has an arc to go on, I'm just not sure it has the time for it, because these films move very snappily as well.
And this one especially, because more so than the other films, this is much more of an adventure movie. The value of peace is a little bit of this movie, but otherwise it's going from place to place, going from thing to thing, and I think that is another one of my biggest criticisms of this movie, is it never takes the time to really establish anything. Every scene or set of side characters that they visit are ostensibly one and done, and they feel very one note. And it kind of just feels like we're going from sequence to sequence to just have a gag happen. Have a gag happen, have a gag happen, have a gag happen. And that got really repetitive and really grating by the end. But I also do think that I think my biggest issue with this film is the comedy, and I hate to say it, but Jack Black's performance. I mean, Jack Black
wow.
is a great voice actor. I think that, frankly, as I said, Poe is his most iconic character. He does a phenomenal job in especially those earlier movies. But even seeing him voice Bowser last year, another one of his great performances. I mean, he is doing a voice. He's leaning into it. But I think it's a combination of two things here. I think it's a combination of the writing. I think that a lot of the line delivery here and the lines that are being said feel like very first pass things. And also, it's very clear he was not given any space to riff. He was reading just the beat by beat. Yep, we got to hit these notes. We got to hit these notes jokes that, for the most part, don't really work. And that is especially true in terms of the more serious lines that he has to deliver. They feel very by the books. He's saying the cat poster on the wall, very basic thing. But the movie does a really annoying thing that I think compounds it even worse, is that it calls that out. It's like, oh, we're doing the tropey thing. Oh, look, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
You've heard this before.
We're lampshading it.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're hanging the lantern
like, no,
on
that
it.
just means it's poorly written and very simple and not very interesting.
Yep, I get you.
And especially by the end, the villain's like, oh, I've got this thing, got to play. It's like, yeah, yada, 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 yada. And it's like, well, that's what the whole movie was, is you going yada, yada, yeah, we get it. And I'm like, I get it. And I'm not interested in what you have to say because it feels like you don't know what you have to say.
If you continually undercut that stuff, then you don't give your audience anything to really care about.
Yeah.
And I think that comes around. I find it very interesting what you have to say with Jack Black's performance and him not having room to riff, because I think that also comes down to a sort of a character progression point. This is obviously the fourth Kung Fu Panda film, and again, they're trying to maybe mature Poe, give him sort of a wizened role, where I don't think they know how to write Poe as that kind of character. Because what is he as a character if he's not messing up and bumbling and saying the wrong thing and so on and so forth? And he's been doing that for 3-4 movies now, and I don't know. I don't feel like they have an idea of how to transition out of that, how to make Poe a character who isn't entirely that, because obviously that's tied to his novice nature.
No, absolutely. I think
the Dragon Warrior.
Yeah, that's a big part of why this movie felt really awkward to me. Is a lot of the comedy I felt was at odds with the more serious ideas of him needing to learn to be able to move on and let someone else take the reins. Those are, I think, reasonably interesting themes, especially for a character we've seen doing this for multiple movies at this point. And it's a well-worn trope for sort of a legacy sequel, pass it on, let the old character sort of grow in a more wizened way. But the slapstick comedy and Poe's skill that we see multiple times throughout this film are butting heads constantly. It's like Poe is supposed to be the best in the world at Kung Fu at this point. He's the Dragon Warrior. He has these skills. He's beaten all these enemies. And we have seen that, and we see that in places here as well. But also, Zhen goes blow for blow with him a couple of times. He's the Dragon Warrior. He's supposed to be able to be a lot better than all the other people. And then he also is doing really dumb, silly Poe things still, and has the slapstick comedy and doesn't quite understand how things are going. And it's has he learned? Has he actually grown? Are his skills that much better? And especially, I think that all of this combines back to the fact that I don't think that this movie sets up the fact that he needs to move on very well. I agree. Young. I don't know how long the time has been in between the first movie.
They make a point not to say it, I feel. Yeah.
But it's not like he's the age that Shifu or Oogway was at the end or the beginning of the first movie, where they are basically dying and they have to pass it on to the next set of people. In this, it's Poe's probably been Dragon Warrior for half a decade or something. I don't know how time works here, but
I think when I remember this because I just watched all the movies actually, that in 2, I want to say, Mr. Ping says he's I raised my son for 20 years. So I'm like, okay, so Poe's 20 at the beginning of the first movie. It's that's what really surprised me when that, because I didn't really know that from the trailers or anything like that.
But apparently there's another trailer that I found today that they start off with that. I'm like, I never saw that trailer. I didn't know that he was supposed to be passing on the Dragon Warrior mantle.
The impetus of him passing the torch is very odd to me, and just sort of maybe put me on an off foot. I was like, okay, but didn't Jack Black say in an interview like literally 2 days ago that he was like, hey, we might do Kung Fu Panda 5 and 6?
Yeah.
I was like, with Po not as the Dragon Warrior? I don't really know. Tucker, let's talk about the side
called
characters,
Kung Fu
shall we?
Fox then? What the fuck is this? I
don't know. The side characters and the villain.
Yeah.
Let's do it at the same time. Should we start with the villain?
Sure.
Start with the chameleon?
Yeah, sure, Tanner. Let's talk about the chameleon. How long do you think we can keep that up for?
It's just been a downward slide with these Kung Fu Panda villains.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. Viola Davis is like doing a fine job. Like I think Viola Davis kind of just has like a baseline of quality of her performances, and this is at the baseline. I'm not gonna be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Like she has just some innate gravitas, but like it's nothing that's really moving the needle.
Yeah, well, especially because we actually saw her do a very similar role to this not that long ago in Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbird and Snake, where she's the conniving villain that's planning things in the background that has...
She's a little off kilter. She's a little crazy.
Yeah. And no one quite knows how to track her. Same thing here, but just... I do feel like she's fine as this, and she brings a little bit of a presence, but this is the most I've ever seen Viola Davis phone in a performance of just like delivering the lines and like, especially because I think the character is not very well written. She has the very basic beat for beat villain backstory, and
I wanted to learn Kung Fu. They said I couldn't learn Kung Fu, and so I became evil.
I became evil, and then we'll use that to steal Kung Fu. I think that the villain being weak, I think, ties into another element of this film with the side characters, the returning characters, that is equally weak, and to me is one of the biggest points of, oh, we're just like dragging the corpse of the series along, is they feel the need to just do the old villains again, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like that signals some shakiness and some like, let's play the hits.
Yeah,
can we get Ian McShane back as Tai Lung?
Yeah, but not
get
the
him
other
back.
ones.
Give him a couple lines. Yeah. I mean, I think they kind of know that like, oh, he's like the one that people remember.
Yeah.
He's the
people
like Lord Shen. People like Lord Shen too. Which, hey, quick deep lore thing about Kung Fu Panda from someone who just watched. Lord Shen, not a Kung Fu master, folks.
Oh.
Never knew he wasn't like an associate of Oogway or Shifu or anything. He was just a guy. He was just like a warlord basically. So like, yeah, you're forgetting your own lore here, DreamWorks. Tisk. Anyway, I like Bryan Cranston and James Hong.
Yeah.
I think they have a good dynamic.
Absolutely.
They established this dynamic in 3, and it carries over to 4. I think they're really fun. And honestly, Bryan Cranston's kind of the MVP of this movie.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I agree.
In terms of line delivery.
Yeah.
if you, especially if you're like you, Tucker, and you kind of feel like Jack Black is kind of stuck running in place.
Yeah.
I think Bryan Cranston is doing quite a good job, actually.
Yeah, their dynamic is one of the most unique elements of this film. We talk about the relationship between Poe and Jen and the villain, and those are just walking in place. We're just doing the thing that that we're gonna do. But having two dads who are going on an adventure to save their son together is actually kind of fun, and they do have a good dynamic, and they're playing off each other's like sort of both proud but also kind of scared, and also like but, like really love their son and want to do anything for him. All that like
having to like feign some bravery in moments.
Yeah.
It's all cute stuff. Yeah.
What else?
What about the bit part of some other side characters like Ronnie Chiang as the fish in the mouth of the pelican? I thought was just a fun little bit character.
It's a clever idea for a character.
It's a clever idea and actually had some lines that got me laughing in the theater. So like I do think the humor is hitting at some points. We also have Quan as like a pangolin named Han, who is fine.
Yeah,
fine.
he's just kind of like
He's
a
fine.
exposition side character who shows up a couple times.
Yep.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even realize it was him at first, and then I looked at the cast. I'm like, Han. How the hell's Han?
Which one's Han?
Yeah. But I think that's the problem with so much of this. As I said earlier, these side characters are we got to keep moving, so we can't linger with them. We can't get the performance or the development that we got out of 5 or 6 characters in that first movie that made that Furious 5 so interesting. Their personalities were fleshed out. Their dynamic was fleshed out. Shifu was more fleshed out, because the side characters here, we're off to another city. We're off to another part of the adventure. We're off to do a thing that can't involve everyone else. And so they're just kind of present to like fill out the cast more. And it's even, it's very apparent that this is not an ensemble movie in the way that the other ones were with the Furious 5, because they don't have those voice actors back. The more expensive voice actors.
we literally open with them saying, hey, the Furious 5 isn't here, by the way.
They're on their own
like,
adventures
again,
to do.
Yeah, like to that, again, like the villain thing, it really signals to me that they're like, ooh, they're tugging at their collar a little bit. It's like we're playing with what we can here, but we don't have all the cards. And then of course, hey, they show up at the end, not with any lines, by the way, except for Seth Rogen is credited because Mantis goes rah in the fight montage, and so he's in the credits.
Oh. That's interesting.
Maybe like archive audio or something. I don't know. Anyway, Tucker, there's something. Oh, the action I want to touch on quickly because that has always been the saving grace of the Kung Fu Panda sequels for me. Is that I'm watching them, I'm like, this is fine. I feel like we're doing a little bit too much, but the action always brings it. And again, I feel like I'm a broken record here when I say it's the weakest in this one. There's not as much flourish in the animation or the design work. There's one chase through the city that they're in that is kind of set to this instrumental version of Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, which is pretty cool. But like, again, it's a lot of the action sequences in Kung Fu Panda are sort of helped along by this flourish of like, that's clearly inspired by like Kung Fu movies of the 70s and 80s, or like the 70s largely, I would think. But there's not a lot of that here, unfortunately.
No, because they opted for a more anime style in this one, where they're doing like these splash screens where like the characters pose and like paint comes up in the background, and I'm like, that's okay, but it's not. It stops the momentum of the fights, and the only one that I thought had any kind of cleverness to it was that final fight with the chameleon, where the chameleon's transforming between a bunch of different stuff, and then becomes this sort of like crazy chimera. And there's some cool shots where Poe's fighting the crazy chameleon chimera in front of the blood moon for a second. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then the chameleon like uses her tongue to grab him, like doing this like bouncing back and forth thing, and like swings him around. I'm like, okay, that's some interesting kinetic action that's using the abilities of this character in a solid way. But the movie actually doesn't have that much action. I mean,
it honestly doesn't. I was also shocked by that.
The first action scene we see is Poe
fighting like a manta ray.
Yeah, what the hell is that? I don't
know. He's just doing Dragon Warrior stuff. That's all we really need to know.
Whatever that manta ray did. Oh, I guess it ate some kids.
Yeah, it did eat a little pig child. Yeah,
3 of them actually.
You're right. I think that's kind of it on Kung Fu Panda. Like, obviously, this movie is going to be very successful, I think. I think especially because, families and kids are sort of starved for their kind of movies in theaters right now. I just wish it was better, and it doesn't necessarily instill me with confidence, especially the note that this film ends on. Going into a potential Kung Fu Panda 5 or 6. Yeah. Especially given, like, how strong this series started with being kind of an iconic sort of kids movie. Of course, we're talking about that from a standpoint of being from the generation that film was targeting. Yeah. But regardless, I think it's well regarded by people of all ages. So, I don't know. Next on Kung Fu Panda 4... In this conversation, I actually went down on my score, so I'm gonna give it like a 4.8.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit lower. I think that it feels like a rush job. It feels like, all right, we need a sequel to put some butts in the seats, and
a rush job that took 8 years.
Well, I don't think it actually did though, because as far as I know,
of course, this hasn't been in production for 8 years.
I think it actually was in production for shorter than most of these kind of movies, because it was only announced to be in any kind of production in like mid 2022, and so like usually animated movies are like 3 to 4 years, but this is a pretty quick turnaround. And Tanner, I just looked it up because I was doing some backlot banter research, and I'm like, oh, okay, what's the budget for Kung Fu Panda 4? $85 million. That is $60 million less than the second cheapest Kung Fu Panda movie. Kung Fu Panda 3. $145 million.
Hey,
Kung Fu Panda
listen,
1,
man, when you are
Kung Fu Panda 2, $150.
When you aren't paying Angelina Jolie, Jackie Chan, Seth Rogen, Lucy Liu, and David Cross probably isn't cutting a big check, but anyway, you're probably gonna save some cash.
Yeah, but I mean, I really do feel like this feels cheaper.
I would agree.
Big chunk of the cast is missing. A lot of the scenes feel a little bit rushed. The action is not as prevalent in this. It feels like they didn't give passes for Jack Black to do his lines again, because there's some lines that I think just land completely flat. I feel like the script wasn't given enough passes to really punch up some of the joke timing and cleverness, and a lot of the like character ideas don't come to fruition near the end. And so this is a very disappointing way to maybe end this or not. Who the hell knows?
I don't know.
Because it did cost significantly less than the other ones. It'll much easier, more easily.
It'll be a big hit.
Yeah.
It'll be a big hit, and I'm sure we'll get some more of these. But Tucker, did you give your score already?
I did not. I will give this a 4.3 out of 10.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, folks, hey, listen, if you got kids, go to see it. It's fine. Like there were some kids in our theater who are clearly having a good time with it, so it's fine for them, I suppose.
Yeah.
But if you're a fan of the series, I feel like the overwhelming conclusion is, not the best.
Yeah, definitely. More bears.
Well, folks,
More bears.
more bears.
Imaginary time.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.